Ella's life had once been everything she had dreamt of. She married the love of her life, David, at the age of 24, and together they built a humble but happy life. David was a hard-working and loving man, and Ella thought that their future was set. The arrival of their daughter, Nina, brought even more joy into their lives. Ella could still remember the day David's eyes lit up the first time he held Nina in his arms, promising to always protect their little family. But life, as Ella would come to realize, was unpredictable and often cruel. When Nina was just 2 years old, David was involved in a tragic car accident and he did not survive. The shock of his sudden death left Ella devastated. Her world crumbled beneath her, and the reality of raising a child alone loomed over her like a dark cloud. She had lost not just her husband, but her best friend, her confidant, and the father of her child. But despite the pain, Ella knew that she had to be strong. She had to pull herself together, not for herself, but for Nina. Ella took on the role of both mother and father, pouring all her love and energy into raising Nina. She returned to work as a nurse, picking up extra shifts to make ends meet. The struggle was real, but Ella persevered. She was strengthened by the presence of her daughter Nina, who was the only person that reminded her of the love she and David had once shared. By the time Nina turned 8, Ella had built a life for the two of them. It wasn't easy, but they had each other, and that was enough. Until one day, when everything changed. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when Ella's life took an unexpected turn. Kemi, her best friend, had invited her to a wedding. At first, Ella refused. She did not feel like socializing, and weddings reminded her of what she had lost. But Kemi was persistent. Ella, you need this. You have been burying yourself in work for too long. It is time you get out, meet people, and maybe even, who knows, start loving again. Ella agreed reluctantly. She wore a simple red dress that she hadn't worn in years and allowed Kemi to drag her out of the house. The wedding was beautiful and Ella had a lot of fun, but not just fun, because that was where she met Daniel. Daniel was charming, with a warm smile and a confidence that immediately drew Ella in. He introduced himself as a businessman and spoke with the ease of someone used to social situations. What caught Ella off guard wasn't just his charm, it was how genuinely interested he seemed in her. He did not just make small talk, he was genuinely interested in knowing her. There was no awkwardness, no pity in his eyes, just interest and respect. By the end of the evening, Daniel asked for her number. Ella hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to open her heart again. But something about Daniel's sincerity made her hand him her phone. Weeks passed and Daniel became really close to Ella. He would text her sweet messages in the morning, send flowers to the hospital where she worked, and took her out to dinners while Nina stayed with Kemi. He seemed perfect, like a man who genuinely cared for her and was eager to be a part of her life. And it wasn't long before he wanted to meet Nina. Nina had always been a perceptive child. She adored her mother and was protective of her in ways a child shouldn't have to be. When she met Daniel, she was excited. She liked the idea of her mother being happy again. But as time went on, something began to bother her. It was nothing obvious at first. Daniel was always kind to Nina, bringing her small gifts and including her in outings with her mother. But Nina noticed how Daniel avoided talking about his own family. Whenever she asked about them, he would change the subject or give vague answers. One evening, Daniel visited them, And while Ella was preparing dinner, Nina overheard Daniel on the phone. He was in the living room, but his voice was really low and serious. Nina quietly crept closer, staying out of sight. She couldn't hear every word, but what she did catch sent a chill down her spine. She doesn't need to know. Just keep everything quiet until after the wedding, Daniel said in a low tone. Nina's heart skipped a beat. What didn't her mother need to know? And why was Daniel talking about a wedding? Nina brushed it aside, but she became more suspicious when 1 month later, Daniel proposed to her mother. It happened on a Saturday evening, just after a family picnic. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the park where they sat. Daniel had been quiet throughout the day, more reserved than usual, but Ella had not thought much of it. Then, as they were packing up to leave, Daniel turned to Ella, took her hands in his, and dropped to one knee. Ella gasped and her eyes widened with surprise as Daniel pulled out a small velvet box. Ella, I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I can't imagine my life without you and Nina. I want to be there for both of you, for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me? Ella's breath caught in her throat. She had not expected this, not so soon. But as she looked into Daniel's eyes, all she saw was sincerity. She glanced at Nina, who was watching quietly from the side. She had her doubts, but Ella's heart, which had been locked away for so long, urged her to say yes. She nodded. Yes, I'll marry you. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in years, Ella felt a fresh hope for the future. But Nina, who was standing at the corner, felt only a deep sense of dread. The following day, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She knew her mother was happy and she didn't want to ruin it. But she also knew that she could not ignore the strange things she had been noticing. While Daniel was at the house one evening, Nina asked if she could play a game on his phone, and he handed it over to her without hesitation. But Nina had other plans. She quickly scrolled through his gallery, looking for anything unusual. That was when she found it, a hidden folder filled with pictures of Daniel with a woman she did not recognize. The photos were intimate and they were recent. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the images. But what shocked her even more was a picture of Daniel with a man who looked familiar. She couldn't place him at first, but then it clicked. Uncle Jude. Uncle Jude was her late father's brother, a man who had vanished from their lives. After David's death, he had been involved in shady dealings, and Ella had cut off all ties with him to protect Nina. But what was Daniel doing with him? Nina's heart pounded as she put the phone back down. Her mind was spinning with questions. She had to tell her mother, but how could she do it without breaking her heart? After days of trying to keep calm, Nina couldn't keep the secret any longer. During dinner the next evening, she blurted out, "Mom, Uncle Daniel is not who he says he is." Ella looked at her daughter in confusion. "What do you mean, Nina?" Nina hesitated for a moment. She then took a deep breath. "I saw pictures on his phone. He's with another woman. And there is a man too, Uncle Jude." Ella froze in shock. What? What are you talking about? Nina's heart pounded in her chest. "I'm telling you the truth, Mom. I heard him on the phone too. He's hiding something. I don't think we can trust him." Ella was still in shock, but she knew that she had to confront Daniel. She asked him to meet up with her at an open restaurant the next day for lunch. After they ate, Ella asked straight up, "Do you know Jude, my brother-in-law?" Daniel, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly looked tensed. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ella cut him off. "Don't lie to me, Daniel. If you know Jude, I need to know the truth." Daniel sighed sadly. Ella, listen, it is complicated.